It's been 2 years and 4 months since a massive earthquake and subsequent tsunami brought Japan's nuclear infrastructure to its knees. The world watched as the Japanese government tried to contain the radioactive materials from spilling out by the gallons into the Pacific Ocean. We watched as elderly Japanese people volunteered to wade into that toxic environment, sacrificing their own lives in an attempt to stop the leak and to save the country. But today we are getting news that the leaks continue. The latest report is a storage tank breach spilling 300 tons of radioactive water into a puddle nearby. The leak is separate from the one that we reported about last week, if you remember that one. A puddle of contaminated water is emitting about 100 millisieverts an hour of radiation. In layman's terms, according to Reuters, the water is so toxic that within 1 hour, a person who's standing about a foot away, who's cleaning it, will receive a dose of radiation 5 times the average annual global limit for nuclear workers. After 10 hours, a person near it will show signs of radiation poisoning. So it's very serious, obviously. But the Japanese government doesn't seem to be too concerned. They call this incident a level 1 out of 7 on the international scale of radiological releases, meaning that it's not very serious. Japanese officials say that they are working to correct the problem. They insist that none of the contaminated water has reached the Pacific Ocean. But this latest leak just reinforces the long-standing concerns over safety.
Operator of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant says radioactive water has leaked out of a treatment facility. It may have spilled into the Pacific Ocean. Spokespersons for Tokyo Electric Power Company say workers may not have reacted quickly enough. The spokespersons say workers detected slightly elevated levels of radioactive cesium in seawater around an outlet from a gutter. Workers found at least 45 tons of water had leaked from a device that removes salt. The water also contains radioactive strontium at levels that could pose health risks if someone were to ingest it.
I'll alert the media.
Workers had last checked the water treatment device 21 hours before they spotted the leak. They found no problems. TEPCO spokespersons admit workers did not do enough to contain the leak because they assumed the water would stay within the building.
I really wouldn't know, sir. I'm just a servant.
TEPCO will take about 2 weeks to complete its analysis.
On the other hand, go screw yourself.
Tokyo Electric has shown where it's processing compensation claims from people affected by the Fukushima nuclear accident. The office is in Tokyo. 5,000 workers accept about 700 compensation claims from individuals and companies every day. The company is under pressure to speed up the work as the number of claims it gets each day is likely to grow.
When the mainstream press and the government says nobody could have predicted this, they're lying through their fucking teeth.
The world's largest emitter of greenhouse gases is taking a longer-term view of climate change. China's representative at the UN Climate Conference in South Africa doesn't rule out accepting a greenhouse gas reduction target after 2020. His stance may affect the course of discussions at the conference. The vice chairman of China's National Development and Reform Commission, Xie Zhenhua, says his country is ready to discuss what it can do beyond 2020. China has so far refused to accept any mandatory emission target. Negotiators at the UN talks are trying to come up with a new framework on global warming. They're discussing what to do after the Kyoto Protocol expires in 2012. China's Xie says scientists need to verify whether industrial nations have actually fulfilled their emission reductions under Kyoto. Japan, among other nations, is calling for a new framework that would include China and other major emitters.
We humans throw a little dash of stupid into everything we do.
Kevin Camps is with Beyond Nuclear. BeyondNuclear.org is the website. The Fukushima China Syndrome and the architect of Reactor 3 are warning of more to come. Plus, there's leaks going on. Kevin, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
If my wife would let me use my Geiger counter, and if I was to go down to the supermarket and find some fish that originated from Southeast Asia, as so much of it does, you think I might find some radiation?
Well, actually you need to do special tests with much more expensive radiation monitors and
this one's $400.
Equipment. Yeah, I hear you.
It catches cosmic radiation.
To find the internal contamination in those fish, which is almost certainly there if they're coming from the Japan East Coast, is to do an analysis in the laboratory, which our federal government, which has the resources, has the equipment, has refused to do from the beginning. And then you're going to start to see the internal contamination.
Yikes. Okay. So what's going on with Fukushima right now?
Well, some very disconcerting news. Tokyo Electric Power Company, nearly 9 months after the meltdowns took place, is now admitting how bad they actually have been. So in Unit 1, which was the first to melt down, they're saying is probably the worst of the 3 reactor meltdowns. They're admitting that there has been very deep melt-through of not only the reactor pressure vessel in Unit 1, but also deep into the concrete primary containment structure. And they're admitting that there's only 1.5 feet of concrete left before the final layer of steel. And then it's a pretty short course into the environment, into the soil, into the groundwater at that point. And bear in mind, this is all a computer simulation by Tokyo Electric Power Company. So what kind of shenanigans they're playing with the computer modeling. But they're admitting that they are very close to the final steel barrier to prevent penetration of the Earth, which is, by definition,
and my recollection of the China syndrome. So basically, in English, what we have here is a molten mass of white-hot radioactive material that used to be the fuel rods, sitting on the floor of the reactor and burning its way through the floor of the reactor. And then it'll burn its way through the steel, it'll burn its way through the concrete underneath, and it'll start burning its way through the rock until it hits a layer of water. And since this is right next to the ocean, that's probably not more than 5-10 feet down. And when it hits that layer of water, it's really hot, the water's really cold, you get something called a steam explosion, and it just blows the hell out of the whole thing. Do I have that right?
Yeah. The architect of Unit 3 at Fukushima Daiichi, a former president of Saga University, so impeccable academic credentials, has said that it's just a matter of time before the molten core, at least in Unit 1, if not also Units 2 and 3, does reach groundwater. And then if it just hits it right and there's enough water and enough molten core, you're going to have a pretty powerful steam explosion. So yet more catastrophic radioactivity releases in a great big hurry, but you've also got just the chronic flow from this site into the ocean, for example. So, even the decontamination system, which is supposed to be taking radioactive contamination out of the cooling water, which is massive in quantity, they're admitting now that they have leaked tens of tons of radioactively contaminated water from that system into the ocean.
Right, where it gets into the food chain, and ultimately it ends up in the fish, and it ends up in my restaurant, and maybe in a quiet corner of the restaurant, Louisa let me take the Geiger counter out and measure the fish. We'll see. But the question, the Chernobyl melted down. I mean, there was a full core meltdown, was there not?
There was more than one massive explosion and then a fire that burned for 10 days. And so, yes, there was a massive meltdown, too, that they were finally able to stop before going any deeper.
So how did they stop the melting core at Chernobyl from melting down through the Earth and hitting a water level, and why can't they do the same thing at Fukushima?
At Chernobyl, they brought in hundreds of miners from Siberia, and in an emergency operation that was round the clock for I don't know how many days, they drilled a tunnel under the Chernobyl reactor building, and they poured massive amounts of liquid nitrogen into the ground to freeze the groundwater, and prevent the molten core from reaching any deeper. And so that's a good question at Fukushima. I am not a geologist, but I imagine the proximity to the ocean, very different than Chernobyl, may have complicated such an operation because, like you said, there's a lot of groundwater, and there's even the ocean right there. So how they're going to get under the reactor in a great big hurry. But they've had 9 months to figure this out, and so the professor from Saga University.
But they can't get this stuff out. It's not like you can go in with a dump truck and just pull it out. I mean, any scoop you put in to grab that molten core, it'll melt right through it.
Well, yes, and at Chernobyl, they got under the meltdown is what they did. They got out in front of it, so to speak.
Right. And they can't do that here. So how many, we've got 6 reactors at Fukushima. We just have a couple seconds, Kevin. 6 reactors at Fukushima. How many have had meltdowns? How many of these might end up with China syndromes?
3 of them, units 1, 2, and 3, and then you got the high-level radioactive waste storage pool at Unit 4. More and more evidence that there was a fire and catastrophic radioactivity release from that pool.
So, and each one could be a Chernobyl.
It's approaching Chernobyl in scale and has matched it and exceeded it in terms of certain radioisotopes. Xenon-133, the releases have been
You're
greater.
listening to the Tom Hartman Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
That's amazing. Kevin Camps, beyondnuclear.org. You can get all the information there. Kevin, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, we've all heard of gross domestic product, but what about gross domestic happiness? The day may not be so far away. The Japanese government is creating a new index that measures happiness. The Cabinet Office unveiled plans for the Happiness Index on Monday. It would evaluate people's well-being through 3 benchmarks: their household wealth, physical and mental health, and community and personal relationships. Each of the benchmarks would be quantified through data such as child poverty rates, suicide figures, perceptions on family ties, and fears about radiation. Experimental data collection is to start next year. The Himalayan nation of Bhutan already uses a similar index to measure gross national happiness, while the OECD is working on an international standard to gauge quality of life.
Humans are fucking stupid. We have been throughout our entire history, and we remain so today. If there ever was just one word to describe humanity, that one word would be stupid. What I am saying here is nothing new. Human stupidity has been a great source of entertainment for us humans for as long as humanity has existed. It is a major cash cow for those smart enough to take advantage of it, and just so happens to be the guiding force behind most things that happen in the world. We take pride in our stupidity, and we labor endlessly to invent new ways to capitalize on our stupidity. We humans throw a little dash of stupid into everything we do. We love being stupid so much that it sometimes hurts. We have always been stupid, and we always will be. And you know what the bitch about it is? It is all our fault. We have no one to blame except ourselves. We, being the stupid fuck-ups that we are, have abandoned the ability to think for ourselves, and instead given that responsibility to people who are often more stupid than ourselves, so that we get to work our shitty 9-to-5 jobs and live our stupid lives without the stress that comes with the ability to think for ourselves. We want to be numb. We want our brains to be on cruise control 24/7. We want our opinions to be cooked in a spoon for us, and we want our thoughts to be given to us intravenously. The masses are all junkies just waiting for the next